Hello all, my name is Yossi, and in today's short lesson I would like to clear up some things about a book called the Septuagint. This lesson is dedicated to the memories of my parents, my father and teacher Avraham Shmuel ben Simcha Bunim, and my mother and teacher Chana bat Shimon. Often when discussing the Tanakh, what Christians call the Old Testament with people, a book called the Septuagint often gets interjected into our conversation as a way to explain why certain verses in the New Testament don't match the Hebrew Bible. A typical line of argument is, the New Testament wasn't quoting from the Hebrew Bible, which was corrupted by the rabbis. Rather, it is quoting the Septuagint. Now, aside from being slander, it's pretty clear that in Christian circles, either little is known about the Septuagint or little is admitted about it. And what I'd like to do today is present the facts about early Greek translations of the Tanakh, among them the Septuagint. First, some terminology so that we're all on the same page. There's something called the Masoretic text. And what is it? This term is typically taken to refer to the 9th and 10th century texts codified by a group of scribes called Masoretes. And they devised a system of vowel cantillation and accentation markings for what had been passed down to them orally until their time. And why do I say typically? Well, because there's evidence going all the way back to the scrolls, the Dead Sea Scrolls of Qumran, Masada, and Nahal Hever, that the Masoretic text, without those markings, of course, was known. Many of the corrections in the Qumran text align those texts with the Masoretic text, and the texts of Masada and Nahal Hever match the Masoretic text, so they're called Proto-Masoretic. Targum HaShivim. The Targum HaShivim, or what we call the Septuagint, originally refers to a Koine Greek translation of the Torah, the 5 books of Moses, the first 5 books of the Bible. The origin of this translation is shrouded in legend, and its creation is mentioned in the letter of Aristeas, by Philo, by Josephus, and in the Talmud. The completion of the translation was annually celebrated, according to Philo, by the Jews of Alexandria, but on the other hand, its composition was considered a great tragedy by the Jewish sages. It's important to note again that this is a translation of only the first 5 books of the Bible. Due to the confusion, though, of the use of the word Septuagint for both the Targum HaShivim and the LXX, we will refer to the Targum HaShivim as the Old Greek translation. So what's the LXX? Well, the LXX is also referred to as the Septuagint, right? So hence there's confusion between it and the Old Greek translation. Well, some claim that the rest of the Tanakh was added to the LXX as early as the 2nd century BCE, but there's not a whole lot of evidence supporting that. The LXX that is used in Christian circles most often post-dates, means comes after the New Testament by about 250 years. So in other words, the LXX is a deeply edited book. If an earlier Greek translation of the entire Tanakh existed before the year 0, the LXX was probably not it. And yes, I know that a copy of the book of Exodus was found at Qumran, and a 1st century copy of the 12 prophets was found at Nahal Hever. Okay, so what's Koine Greek? Koine Greek, as opposed to classical Greek, is a kind of amalgamation of different Greek dialects, and it was the international language of the day. The LXX and the New Testament are written in Koine Greek, as well as Josephus and Plutarch, among others. The Hexapla. The Hexapla is a work by the great Christian scholar Origen. Nobody knows for sure the reasons behind his compilation of this book, but it is reasonable to believe that it was part of some attempt on his part to arrive at an authoritative Greek translation of the Bible. The Hexapla is so named because it had 6 columns. The first was the original Hebrew text. The second was a transliteration of the Hebrew text into Greek, and the remaining 4 columns were 4 different Greek translations, one of which was maybe to become the LXX, or certainly the foundation thereof. Okay, so now we've defined our terminology, and let's take a closer look at the LXX. First of all, there are vast differences in the quality of translation of different books. The translation of the Torah, the first 5 books of the Bible, is considered very good. Professor Emmanuel Tov, one of the foremost researchers in this area, believes that the translation was used in the synagogues of Alexandria in a similar way that Aramaic translations are used in the Yemenite community until today. In the Yemenite community, as each verse of the Torah is read, it is translated into Aramaic. Professor Tov holds that this is probably the reason that the quality of translation is so much better than the rest of the LXX. So let's look at the other books of the Bible. The LXX translation quality ranges from so-so to terrible, with scholars in total agreement that the translation of the book of Isaiah is an unintelligible train wreck. Well, there are several reasons for this variance, and let's talk about them. Well, for starters, some books were translated literally word for word, with little or no attention paid to Greek idiom. And this makes for a difficult to understand translation because the sentence structure, language structure of Hebrew and Greek are so very different. Another issue is the extensive use of what is called Hebraisms. Well, Hebrew terms that were written in Greek characters such as Shabbaton for the Sabbath or Shabbat, or Nazir or Naziros for one who has taken the Nazirite vow not to cut his hair nor to drink wine. These words and others did not exist in Greek. They were understandable to those Hellenized Jewish communities who might have used these translations but had no meaning to the Gentile Greek. Well, in other cases, the translators didn't even understand the word that was being translated, so he transliterated it into Greek characters. Well, there's even stranger things. So how about this one? Translators would sometimes not know the meaning of a Hebrew word, so they'd look for a similar word in Greek, even though the two words were totally different, and use that word. Well, if that's not enough, there were many different translators, and there was no common translation guidelines. They worked on the Bible at different times and whatnot. In many cases, different translators translated the same book. It appears that there are actually quite a few different translations floating around at the time. We've got evidence from Origen's Hexapla. There were 4 different versions. And the first official version merged together a hodgepodge of these different translations and a very uneven end result. Well, just some notes for conclusion. A common claim is the LXX differs from the Masoretic text because the Masoretic text represents a rabbinic corruption of some more ancient Hebrew text. Those who say this claim that the rabbis had to change the Hebrew text to make it disagree with Christianity. They bring as witness the scrolls from Qumran, which they claim more closely match the LXX and the Masoretic text. Okay, again, outside of outright slander, here are the problems with that claim. Even a cursory look at many of the Qumran scrolls, you will see corrections all over the place. You don't have to know Hebrew to see this. Just go to the website and take the time and look up the Great Isaiah Scroll. You can browse it online. Note how many letters and words are above the lines. These are corrections. Note words with dots above them or dots below them. These are erasures. There are words and even entire verses written in the margin and squeezed between lines. These are corrections. And they were largely made to make the text match the Masoretic text. And if that's not enough, the largest number of biblical Qumran scrolls are what are called Proto-Masoretic. They match the Masoretic. In addition, the scrolls from Masada and Nachal Chever match the Masoretic text, as do the Simir amulets from Katef Hinon. So if the rabbis were out there changing texts to make them less Christian-like, they were doing it a long time before Christianity, certainly before Jesus was born. Well, another similar claim is that the New Testament quotes the Septuagint because it is, again, as claimed, superior to the Hebrew. Well, if this were the case, why did the authors of the King James Version insist on translating from the Hebrew and not the LXX? Now, furthermore, any translation is going to differ from the original. 2 cases in point. We Jews have the Aramaic translations, the Targum Onkelos of the Torah, and the Targum Yonatan of the rest of the Hebrew Bible, and both are considered commentary. Nobody expects them to be word-for-word translations. Remember, those parts of the LXX that are word-for-word translations are considered bad translations. Okay. One final very important note. Remember that the LXX was written after the New Testament. It appears that it wasn't the New Testament quoting the LXX, but rather the LXX translating the New Testament. And again, don't take my word for it. Do the homework. Open your books. Go to the website. Prove these things to yourself. God bless. Kol tuv. And take care.